I want to talk to you about pacing because it's really, really, really important. But I hear this loads. Loads. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to, whether they're super experienced or they're first time runner. I'm chatting to them, I'm going, how was your race? How was the run? And they go, oh yeah, I was going really well, it was really good. And then right at the end, the wheels fell off and the last few miles were really difficult. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I've heard that before. Why was that the case? More often than not, there's three main reasons why people experience that, regardless of level of experience. Alright, here are my three reasons why I think people experience that the wheels fell off in the second half. The first one is they haven't done the training. Right, they just haven't done the training. You've got to put the miles in. If you don't put the miles in, then the second half of any race always feels difficult. The second one, particularly in the longer stuff, is they haven't fueled appropriately in the days leading up to an event and then in the event itself. This is particularly important for half marathon running and marathon running. Right, so if anyone here is a half marathon runner, a marathon runner, those two. The third one, poor pacing. Right, they get, for whatever reasons, they get their pacing wrong. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the third one in quite a lot of detail. Okay? Why is pacing so important? Well, pacing is really important. Great pacing means you don't slow down. I have lots of conversations about the kind of pacing that is the best pacing. And for me, I think even pacing is best. Right? What do I mean by even pacing? I mean running the same split per mile or kilometre for the whole race, regardless of distance. So if we're talking about smashing out 1 mile as hard as you can, then I still think an even paced mile is the best way to approach it. If you're talking about a marathon, 26.2 miles, I still think even paced running is the best because it's consistent. You spread your energy out really evenly and effectively and efficiently. You drip the energy out over the whole race instead of blowing everything super quickly at the start. That means you've got less chance of doing the bloke in the first slide, having the crash and burn moment when the wheels fall off. You've got a much less chance of doing that if you pace yourself sensibly. You've got a greater chance of having a good race. There's no better feeling than having a great race in the second half. It's much better. Feel good in the second half and feel great in the first half and dreadful in the second half. I want to give you an example. This is from London Marathon a few years ago, a couple of years ago. Right? The average time was 4 hours and 41 minutes. The runners that ran faster kept a more consistent pace. 5k split times became slower as the race progressed, right? So people slowed down. Great pacing is about minimising your slowing down, trying to not slow down so that you run even. Right? There was a Human Race did another race recently in Kingston, where they looked at the split times across all of the runners, and what they found was that most people ran a positive split. They ran the second half slower than the first. Some people ran a negative split, and a lot of people ran evenly. But the most common thing that people did was a positive split, running the second half slower than the first. In this London race that I'm looking at, it took people 24 minutes to complete the final 2k. Right, that's quite a lot of time, okay? Which shows you that at the end of this particular race, it wasn't stinking hot this year, but at the end of this particular race, people really slowed down on average. Of course, to have a great paced race, what we want to do is keep that pacing consistent and even, right? So I want to think about how you know what that looks like, because I'll tell people this, I'll say, have a great race, be even paced, and they just go, I haven't got a clue what my pace is. How do I know? I haven't got a clue. So I want to share with you a few thoughts on working that pace out. You've got to know what effort level you can sustain for the entire duration of your chosen event. Right, now that's easier said than done. Again, most people, the answer is, well, I don't know. What, you tell me. You're the coach, you tell me. And I believe actually that the runner should have a great understanding of the effort level that they can sustain, whether that's for 1 mile, 10k, half marathon, marathon, ultra. You need an understanding of that level. We'll have a really good idea of it. You need to know then what that level of effort equates to in terms of time. So what's a meaningful amount of time per mile? You learn this in training. You learn it in training. You also know your pace by understanding what that goal is. I'm going to come back to the training thing because that's the most important thing. You've got to be really honest with yourself. If you're not honest with yourself and you think, hi, I'm doing a marathon, my training said I can run a 10-minute miling quite comfortably on my long runs, I'm going to try and break 3 hours on race day, the probability is you're not being honest with yourself and it's not going to happen. Right? You have to be brutally honest with yourself at this point. Otherwise, you'll be that person leaning on the fence at mile 20. And you don't want to be that person. You want to be the person who's really strong and on it in the second half. From experience, I see two things. I see with novice runners that they need to learn to go slower. They need to learn to go slower. For experienced runners, they need to learn to go faster, but for longer. And the for longer is the difficult thing. Okay? They need to go faster for longer. You've got to practice it. We're going to do some of that outside. For those of you that fancy a little pace club, we're not going to think mad, by the way. We're not going 26.2 miles at a given pace. We're just going to get to learn about what a pace feels like. You've got to practice your race pace, your target race pace in training and have a really good understanding of it. So my wife's a marathon runner, at least she was before she had those 2 little babies that crept up on the screen at the start, right? She's a marathon runner. And if I said to her, Liz, can you go and run a mile at your target marathon pace, please? Not like in the middle of the dinner or like in a training session. She would be able to go out and run a mile at that pace, pretty much nailing it on the head. Okay, so okay, go and do your mile pace, which incidentally for Liz was about 5:35, 5:40 pace. So for you guys, if you're doing a half, a 10k, a marathon, whatever that is, if I say to you, right, out you go, let's go run a mile at your target race pace, you should go, yeah, I can do that, and go and be able to do it, stand alone, almost to the second. If you can't do that, you don't have an understanding of your race pace, and you're more likely to be the bloke leaning on the fence on the first lap. I want to talk about the training stuff. I've got some ideas to give you in training. But I also see a lot of the predicted time stuff. So if you're going to run a mile in this time, you can run a marathon in this. Or if you can do 10 800s and they're all in 4 minutes, you can run a 4-hour marathon. Okay, I see lots of prediction type equations. So there's a few thoughts on those with an example, just to give you an idea. I believe you know yourself better than anyone. Right? You're your best coach. But you have to learn how to be that coach. So when you look at a prediction table, or you type your times in on the internet to say what time you could run a half or a marathon in, take it all with a little pinch of salt, because you know yourself better than anybody else. Right? It's a bit more of an art to putting together a pace than a simple number. Right? What we do know though is that the race pace decreases as the race doubles. So 4 or 5% from a half marathon to a marathon, for example, and that's the example that I want to give you. Those charts also don't take into account the race itself. So there's a bloody great big hill in the first mile, right? Or there's a big downhill stretch at mile 10 to 12. They never take into account the terrain of the race. They never take into account the fact you've got the world's most brutal headwind for the first half. You know? So you've got to learn to deal with those conditions in your training, and then learn to deal with them in the race. Right, let's pull up this, because this is really useful. This, I think, is a very useful chart for those of you converting from half marathon to marathon. Right, so a half marathon to marathon. So if you're using a half marathon as training, I'll bring up the details on a subsequent slide, but there's a couple of half marathons that Human Race are doing next year. The Race Your Pace Half at Dorney Lake in February, where there's regular timing mats, regular pace groups, to give you an idea of a pace for you. But what do you do with that information in order to look at your marathon? So here's an example, alright? Race a half marathon, double your time in minutes, add 10%, and then work out your mile split, because that's all a bit worse. Is that clear with that table? Yeah? I think this is being videoed, so if you can't remember the table, it is being videoed by the guys at Run 247, who are going to give it to the guys at Human Race, so that they are going to put it on their website so that you can see this. Okay, so if you want to come back, you've forgotten it, you don't have to remember it now. Right. So use these charts as estimations. The best way is to go and do it, right? To actually do it. You learn that pace. So if by looking at that chart you've gone, right, I did my last half marathon in 2 hours, my marathon pace is now going to be about 10 minutes per mile. Right, I need to go and see what that feels like. And I come pitching up to you and I say, go and run a 10-minute mile. And the probability is you go and run a 9-minute mile. And we have a little laugh about how you're going to feel in the second half of the race. That's what will happen. So you have to learn your great pacing, right? So here's something really simple to do in your training. Really, really straightforward. 3 times 1 mile efforts. Run one of them at 30 seconds per mile, slower than your target pace. So using our 10-minute mile per mile, our 4-hour marathon, it was 4-hour 24 marathon, I'll run at 10:30. I'll do a mile at 10:30. Then I'm going to do a 10-minute mile. Then I'm going to do a 9:30 mile. And you should be able to do those miles and understand the difference. Most people that I do this with get it wrong. They get it wrong most of the time, until they really practice. Having an understanding of different paces in your training means you can lock in and dial in to your marathon or half marathon or 10k pace much better. So if there's any of you here just like slide your training shoes on and go off at the same pace, run all the time, that's all you ever do, go out at the same pace, change it a little bit, mix it up and run at different paces. And when you're doing this, learn to understand what it feels like. Consciously getting a bit hippie now, I'm going to hug a tree with you in a minute, but get a bit mindful, right? Understand and use some of your feelings of effort. How are you breathing? What's your heart rate doing? How are your muscles feeling? What's your foot strike doing? Think about it and understand it. Listen to all of those things, your rating of perceived exertion. Right? I'm a bigger fan of RPE than I am watches, Garmin's, things like that. Okay? Should you use if I gave you the same example and said, right, go and run a 10-minute mile, and you did this straight away. I'm ready, wait, satellites, got to wait for the satellites. If that's you, then have a rethink. Okay? You need to be able to do it with this and without it. Okay? With and without. It's no good being able to go and run a 10-minute mile, but you're so dependent on your GPS that when you get to your race and you're there and you're on the start line and there's 20,000 other people and you're going, hang on, I can't go yet because I can't pick up the signal, and then you panic as the race unfolds. Your battery goes halfway through your half marathon, and you think, oh no, that's the end of the world. You have to be able to do it without your watch. So ditch the distractions, and a really good training technique is to pop a little bit of electrical tape over the screen. Because even if you wear it and you go, oh, Martin said not to look, I can guarantee you'll go, like, you will do that. So put a little bit of electrical tape over it, and then when you get back, then you can take the tape off and have a look, and you can see how amazingly accurate you were, or what a complete muck-up you made. Alright? Choose routes you know the exact distance of. So you've run them with your GPS, and then sometimes you'll run them without your GPS. And you'll look at the cooker clock before you go, and then you'll run the run, you'll come back in, you'll look at the clock on the cooker again, and you'll go, oh, it took me 40 minutes to do those 4 miles. Right, I must have been running at 10-minute miles, good on me. Right? So do that. Good, don't be reliant on things like this. This is probably the most important one. So as well as doing the interval type work where you break stuff up, do some structured, paced work, right, for a long period of time. That doesn't mean go and smash out an entire race distance at target race pace. So your half marathon or your marathon, you don't want to do that. But you do want to do some sustained running at target race pace. Because if you can't do it in training, you're not going to do it in a race. Back to my original point, if your goal is to break 4 hours for a marathon for the very first time, then you can't do the last 10 miles of your long run at 9:09 miling, whatever, I think it's that, then you are not going to do the marathon, right, in that target pace. Just said that. Get used to what it feels like under pressure and in different situations too. Because there's nothing like being on the start line to a race. Because we can do all of these wonderful things in training, and we can go into the race thinking, I've got this nailed. I am a perfect pacer. And we can get on the start line and totally balls it up. Right? We've all done it. I'm sure you've all done it. So I want to think about ways for you to get the race day right. Okay? These are the other 2 races that I spoke about at the start that give you the opportunity to clearly practice your pacing. Right? There you go, I should use this again. One on 15th Feb, one on 23rd March. Half marathon and then 8 and a 60 mile. Okay, perfect for spring marathon. Here's the things I've seen that people get wrong most of the time. Forget absolutely everything and just go off too fast. Classic. Ignore all of your planning, alright? Lose your focus, lose your discipline, go off too fast. Follow somebody else. They look like they're going to do the same time as me. How on earth do you know that? Okay, you don't. You know that if they are a pacer and they've got a little banner that says 3 hours 59, then it's okay to follow them if you want to break 4 hours for the marathon. Alright, but not some random that you've never met, just because they've got a nice smile on the start line. Run erratically, right? That's something else I see people do an awful lot. Zigzag run, up and down. They don't run, like I said at the start, consistently, evenly and smoothly. They run erratically. Give up. Okay? Another absolute pacing classic. Get to 2/3 of the way into the race, look at your watch, realise you're off time and sack it in. Give up the effort. Okay, what's the point in that? You've just invested 3 or 4 months into training for a particular race to get there and say, oh well, I've had enough now, I'll get back home. Okay, that's absolutely not going to get you anywhere. Alright, so these are the mistakes that I see most often, particularly with half marathon and marathon runners. So these are the things that I think you should do instead. Alright? Be disciplined at the start. Be really disciplined. Have a really strong, focused mindset. That doesn't mean that you have to be proper miserable, because you don't. You can still be nice, but you can have a very focused mindset. Alright? You don't need to be too competitive at the start. You don't need to get overexcited, go off like a steam train. You just need to be cool and calm and relaxed. And you need to concentrate. And you need to be positive. And you need to know those splits. Sometimes you can get a pace band. Liz used to write numbers all up her arm, so she'd see it. She's got really thin arms as well, so it's quite difficult. But whatever way that you work it out, have that detail so that you know exactly what you need to do. Your rhythm should be the same. A rhythm should roughly be the same when you're running. It might vary, of course, because you're going downhill or uphill. Your pace may change, but your rhythm should be roughly the same. Your spread of effort should be even. Don't get frustrated. It's easy to get frustrated in a mass participation race because people are in front of you, you're getting cross, you try and get past them, you're wasting energy, and then in the last few miles the dodging and weaving that you did at the start comes back and gives you a nasty kick. It's cool, it's super cool. I think a bit tidal, I've used this analogy before, where if you're doing all of these things, the likelihood is in the final third of the race you will be more confident because you'll be going past people. What I mean with thinking tidal is, at the start you will start the run and those people that got enthusiastic and excited may go away from you as you're diligently dialing in to your pace. You're thinking, no, I said I'm going to run 9-minute miling. I'm not going to get into the 8:45 or the 8:30 group. I'm knocking this pace in. I'm being disciplined. The tide may run out. People may run away from you. In the middle third of the race, typically that tide will stay out. You'll find your little group. You'll be in a group of runners all moving around about the same pace. Everything's settled down. Nobody else is uber excited. It's all calmed down a bit. And then at the end, if you've done these things, your tide comes back. Those people that started off super quick, they then come back to you and you go past them. You're moving through the field. And that's how, by spreading your effort out more evenly across the race, you run a much better overall race. It's not easy, is it? This is the bit about giving up. There will be a few ups and downs. You will have to give yourself a bit of talking to, because you'll look at your watch and you'll be 15 seconds off the time, or 30 seconds off the time, or minutes down, or even minutes ahead. So you do have to expect a few ups and downs. They do pass. You'll feel amazing one moment and you'll feel dreadful the next. That will go. You just have to work through them. It also helps to break up your paced run. Right? So to say, right, I'm going to have a landmark here It's 3 miles in. A landmark here, a landmark here. I know I cross a bridge then. I know I'm seeing my son, my daughter, my dad, whatever it is at this particular point, and use that as a landmark in your head so that you've got a benchmark. Be flexible, right? If it's not over, it doesn't mean, if the pace isn't bang on, it doesn't mean your race is over completely. Okay, there are things you can do. If you started too quickly and suddenly you look at your watch and you're going, blimey, I'm 3 minutes up and I'm only 4 miles in. Okay, you just have to calm yourself down and continue in the race. Just be calm. If you start the race off and you look at your watch and you're miles behind schedule, don't automatically leg it for a mile and try and catch everything up in the next mile or two. Particularly if you're in a half or a full, scratch away at seconds across the entire race distance so that you get back on track in the later stages of the race instead of blowing it all in the middle section because you felt you were off pace. Run your own race as well. You know, absolutely run your own race. Get in your own little bubble, your own little zone. Have something that you do. So if I'm working with somebody who is particularly influenced by those around them in the race, at the start they get very nervous, they're always relying on other people, we'll have a little thing that they do, which is their, I'm now in my own little zone. So it might be put their cap on, right? Cap on. When the cap goes on, the rest of the world, you're not here, all right? Or when the zip goes up, or when the number gets pinned on, there's a significant thing that you do that flicks a switch in your head that says, this race from now on is all about me. It's all about me. And I love you all the same, but don't speak to me because I am now concentrating on doing my own run. Here's a bit to find out some more. Right, I blab on about stuff like this every week for about 90 minutes on Marathon Tour. I'm on Twitter at Yelling, and I'll be at these events in the spring. Okay, so we're 1:45. We got about 10 minutes for any questions. If there's something that I haven't covered, or if there's something that you think, oh, I don't get that, ask a question. Now is your chance.